Maestro Ling, I know you're really busy with your international travel, so I just wanted to say that it's a real honor to have you here with us today.
It's a great pleasure to be in this high school, especially because my daughter also attending this high school. It's wonderful to see you work for this TED Talk.
Thank you. So to begin, many in our audience here today are unfamiliar of what it really means to be a conductor. So when you stand in front of your orchestra with your baton in hand, what exactly are you doing?
Well, the job of conductor, there are threefolds. The first thing is to learn the score of what the composer wrote, so you will understand how he put everything in the notes, and then to interpret it, to analyze it, to digest it, so that you can inspire the orchestra for performance. Um, the second is to prepare for the rehearsals, because you have to rehearse with the orchestra when you preparing for a performance. And the third, of course, the performance itself, because then what you do in the performance sometimes a little bit different than the rehearsal, because you have to put certain spontaneity of it, so it will be a refreshing feeling for the audience to hear it. Uh, many people has many people have the misconceptions about conductor's job, because they think that just waving your arm, giving the beat, or just giving the tempo or what speed it is, you know. But actually, uh, a conductor use their power of suggestion to the orchestra, because the conductor itself, himself or herself, um, uh, he doesn't make any sound, because the baton doesn't make any sound. The sound made by the orchestra. So you have to inspire them and direct them with a unified concept, because it's important that you have 100 musicians in the orchestra, but you have to inspire them to become one voice. So if, some people said, "Oh, orchestra always can play without conductor." Of course they could. You know, so, one of my colleagues said, "If you give an orchestra an upbeat, a downbeat, and they will play. Especially if you give them a paycheck." So they will definitely be able to play nicely. But the only thing is that an orchestra without conductors is like a football team, a basketball team without a coach. So every player can do whatever they want, but not necessarily have the winning situation, right? So that's the part of the job of the conductor, to let them have one concept, unified concept.
We actually have a video showing this in process. Is there anything that we should take note of when we give our audience insight into the role of the conductor? We'll be showing the first 20 minutes or 20 seconds of the first movement of your Mahler's Symphony Number 5.
Yes, this performance, I did it with the Curtis Symphony Orchestra. Curtis is one of the most prestigious uh, music school in the United States. You know, they produce the best of the uh, upcoming performers, not only for United States, for the world. For example, like Lang Lang, Yefim Brofman, you know, everybody that have that kind of talent, they could be admitted and then trained at Curtis. And this orchestra I conducted, it was so amazing, because they are not professional; they are student orchestra. Some of them are like your age here, you know, very young, and they have a regular rehearsal like professional orchestra with me, and then they perform in the hall where the Philadelphia Orchestra used regularly perform there. So this is a very special orchestra, because, of course, they don't have any experience. But when you hear the final product after you rehearse with them, after you perform with them, and it's just amazing. And they were so proud of what they're performing, and they even put it on the YouTube. This is actually taken from the YouTube of they putting there by the Curtis people there. So it's something that about Mahler composing the Fifth Symphony, which is very, very tricky, very, very complex symphony. But the first movement talking about funeral march, because he has his friend, he has other people that just passed away, and then he want to write something in remembrance of them. And with the funeral procession, this symphony started with a trumpet. If you remember that when we honor our heroes before they were buried in the National Cemetery, for example, you always hear a bugle call. And what we will call is with the trumpet. You remember, bam, 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 ba, ba, bee, those things. Now, the funeral march is also start with the trumpet, but it's a different thing because Mahler was influenced by Beethoven with the Fifth Symphony. You remember Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, which is very famous for everybody that know this theme? Beep, 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 boom, pa, 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 beep, right? You know that. And you hear, oh, that's Beethoven. You can right away know the character of Beethoven. And Mahler was influenced by Beethoven, so the notes, the three notes of the trumpet is also sound like the triplet, ta 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 ta, ta 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 ta, that rhythm. Now you can hear that. I know it's I know it's very short now, but if you're interested to hear more, you can search it in the YouTube with the Kurdish Symphony, Mahler Symphony Number 5, and you can hear more about that sound of the trumpets and things like that.
So, as a pianist, I've learned that music goes beyond just playing the notes, but it also involves playing the meaning and the emotion behind the piece. So, how do you communicate as a conductor the meaning of a piece?
The difficulty as a conductor is that you do not produce the sound yourself. You depend. I might be too close here. I'm not used to holding mic because I used to holding this. Uh, what I'm saying that you don't have the luxury of producing the sound yourself. When you are a drum player, a guitar player, a trumpet player, you play it and the sound come out. Now, as a pianist, I started to play piano when I was 3.5 years old by myself, just watching a teacher, a kindergarten teacher playing in my home. And some of you probably have seen my exhibition in the Bonita Museum last September. They chronicle my life from Indonesia, starting from my birth until now. And one of the pictures is when I was like 3.5, 4 years old playing a piano. And that's where I feel like I can express the meaning or the feeling of what I feel about the music by playing, because I can play it any way I want it. Softer, louder, faster, slower, and then much more intensity, much more urgency, sometimes sad, sometimes happy. You can express it. But as a conductor, you cannot produce that sound. You have to depend of other people producing the sound. What you do is you're directing with your body language, with your eyes, with your manner to inspire this musician to produce the sound for the audience. So when the audience hear it, they will be moved. Their soul will be touched. Their heart, their emotion will be moved. That's the job. And the difficulty is that you have the layer of with the orchestra, not just an instrument that you play, to express all those content of what the composer wanted.
Going off of that, most in our audience don't perform classical music, or many of them don't even listen to classical music. Do you think that classical music has this power even with those who don't have experience with it?
Of course. You have to remember, I grew up in Indonesia, which is half the globe away, all right? And in those time, I grew up without any exposure to classical music. The only classical music we had at that time is listening to radio, a mono radio, not even stereo. And I remember I listened first time, Beethoven Fifth Symphony. Pa, 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 pa. Where was it? On the radio, broadcast by BBC. All right? You know BBC, British Broadcasting Company. And when Churchill just died, they played Beethoven 5, the Beethoven Fifth Symphony. And I heard it first time. So it gave me such an impact because, Churchill, of course, was really a great, great man that basically saved, many parts of the world from the catastrophe of the Nazi occupation. So he was strong. I mean, recently I saw a movie of Churchill doing these things. And then when you remember again what those Beethoven 5, to me, is very meaningful. You don't have to be like an instrumentalist or a singer to understand classical music. You can enjoy and appreciate classical music by listening. At that time, we didn't have any luxury because, you know, in Indonesia, Dutch reigned Indonesia for 300 years. During 300 years, they brought the culture of the European culture to Jakarta, to Indonesia, to as a whole. And then when they left, Indonesia became independent in 1945. The Dutch left back to their country. They left a lot of cultural remnant, I said it like, like old record. You know, they don't have a CD at that time. They don't have a hard drive. They don't use Spotify. All those things. They only have what? Old LP record, 78 RPM, 33 RPM. And I had to get it in the antique store, in the used things where they sell used thing. And you get it, and then you play it at home. So those are the things that I was exposed. But then how I become interested to hear classical, because you hear it and you feel something meaningful. Because this music have existed for many centuries. Remember from Bach, until now, over 300 years, and then how impacted the whole world of this culture. And if you listen to Bach music, there's something special to give you like the solemnity, the dignity, and all the things that you want to pursue in your lifetime. And then when you hear Mozart, it's something like always difficult life. Most of the composers, they live very poor life, but then the music did not reflect that. It's full of joy, full of optimism. Mozart, he composed things when he was 3 or 4 years old. And that when he wrote it, he lived your spirit. Beethoven, with his against all the art, even though everybody against him, but said, I'm going to write something like the Fifth Symphony, because the Fifth Symphony, basically for him to tell the world that I'm not just accepting the fate that I'm supposed to have. I want to make sure I can win. So at the end, the last movement, the C major, that give you the lift. Whenever I conducted that, when I hear that again, it's always lift my spirit up, And then you have to know Beethoven, when he wrote the 5th to the 9th symphony, from the 6th to 9th symphony, 7th to 9th symphony, he started to gone deaf. He cannot hear anymore. When he wrote the 9th symphony, he was completely deaf. So many people ask me, what's the fair? Why that God is not fair, everybody giving everybody the same? Look at Beethoven. Beethoven, he loved music. He composed great music. But God did not give him a perfect hearing. He was deaf, but he still could write a great music. That's called the fairness. Because through the difficulty, you can surpass it against the odds. That's how the classical music inspired me.
We'll be ending with one final question. So, as previously mentioned, many of us don't have a connection with classical music. So to end off this interview, to these people, what message do you have?
I think that for you to, right now, you can easily listen to classical music, through internet, to live concerts. San Diego Symphony, we perform for over 60,000 children every year. Why? Because we want to expose them to the great classical music so they can be influenced and they can be brought up in the great tradition of our Western civilization culture, because this is part of the great culture that we inherit. We should introduce to everybody, because everybody can learn something from classical music. Because some people think that, classical music is for the old age. I show you now, you come to me to concert in Asia, I have people in the general audience of thousands of people, half of them are young people. And when I was performing there, after the concert, they would stand in line for more than 2 hours to ask for my autograph and selfie. Their age, 9 to 16. Okay? So exposure for young people is very important, because if you hear it and you love it, and you can really enrich your life, because your life will be some more inspired and more what I say, find the right word, is the uh, to pursue something more than you dream. Okay, so I would encourage you, come to concert. Next week I'm conducting San Diego Symphony from Friday to Saturday. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Joshua Bell, which is, he played for me when he was 17 years old, and he made a great career all over the world. He make a great career. Now he's performing with every great orchestra in the world. Now he's coming to perform only for one day on Sunday. He hasn't performed here since 2013, which how many years? 6 years. So if you have a chance, try to listen. A person like that, he's an American. He started very young age, and now he's performed all over the world. He even has his own orchestra in London, the Academy of the in St. Paul Cathedral. You remember the wedding of Princess Diana, and that is the orchestra reside there. So you could really enjoy to hearing a live classical music. All the best to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This really has been inspirational for me, and I'm sure I speak for the audience when I say that. So thank you.
Thank you.